Welcome to the Convocation Unscripted, where religion, culture, and politics intersect in real time. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. Jamar Tisby, joined, as always, by Diana Butler-Bass
Hi, Jamar.
and Kristen Dumay.
Hey, Jamar, happy birthday.
Thank you, and happy birthday to you this week as well. And Robbie Jones.
Hi, everybody.
So, of course, we're scholars, three historians, and we have let in the sociologist here. We explore how religion shapes America's past and present. But there's a twist. One of us picks a topic. The rest don't know exactly what's coming. There's no what's gonna come. There's no prep, no scripts, just raw, unfiltered conversation. And that's why we call it the Convocation Unscripted. And this episode is officially in session. It's so good to see everyone. It's been a while since all four of us were on. And as we always do, we just like to catch up on our comings and goings, anything fun, exciting, interesting happening in your world. So, Robbie, why don't you kick us off? What have you been up to?
Well, just last night, I was at the Alexandria Remembrance Community Remembrance Project, which is this amazing local effort. Actually, Diana, I was like one metro stop away from you last night down in Old Town, and so I was there to give a talk, and it was the 128th anniversary of the lynching of a man named Joseph McCoy that occurred just 5 days after Easter in 1897. Fit the kind of mold, falsely accused of sexually assaulting, in this case, a white child, and then, ripped from the jail by 500, people and shot and hung from a lamppost, in downtown Alexandria. So it was held at Roberts Memorial United Methodist Church, which was the home church of his family, it turns out. And there were actually several of his descendants in the audience for the event. The mayor was there, the chief of police was there, there were 3 city council members there. So it was actually really heartening to see people showing up, right? Even in this climate, the mayor actually gave a really impassioned talk in the opening, just saying, like, we're here, we're going to tell the truth in Alexandria, no matter what they're doing across the river, and so, I gave a talk just talking about the importance of remembering, and just to give you a little image of it. So it's a modestly sized United Methodist Church, but it occurred to me as I was walking up that I was still there and the church was still decorated with Easter lilies around the pulpit. And of course, down below that was this table, right, the communion table. It had carved in the oak table in remembrance of me, right, the communion table. And just, this ritual of remembering and truth telling, and that, it's not just about history, but it's about who we are. And that was the kind of point that really came home to me. I think about this stuff a lot, obviously, but just realizing that, actually the wisdom of religious traditions is that we remember these things, not just to get our facts right, but we remember these things because they shape who we are and they shape who we're going to be in the future. And that's what's really important about telling the truth and preventing the lies, the erasures, that's going on all over the place. I'll point to one thing in the future. I'll hand it off. I guess back to you, Jamar, is this coming Tuesday will be one day from the 100th day of Trump's administration. And we at PRRI, Public Religion Research Institute, have just hot off the press, we will have a brand new poll being released to 5,000 Americans, what they think about Trump's first 100 days. Lots, I can't talk about it quite yet, but there's lots of really interesting stuff in there about what people think about tariffs, harsh immigration tactics, what his job approval is, whether people think Trump is a dangerous dictator or a strong leader, those kinds of things. So stay tuned. We'll be joined by Joy Reid and by Sarah McCammon from NPR, as well as Melissa Duckman from PRI. So stay tuned for that. That's coming next Tuesday. You can register for it now on the PRI homepage. So Jamar, where are you?
That sounds fabulous. I'm in a hotel lobby, y'all. I know it looks like a fake background, but it's actually a real background here. And they don't have my room ready. So if you hear elevator music in the background or somebody yelling or whatever that is just the
Or if you're
ambient
handcuffed and
energy.
drug out of the lobby.
That it already the one of the employees came up. I had come in before and I'd gone out to eat lunch and came back, but he forgot he helped me. So he's like, excuse me, sir, what are you doing? May I help you? It's like, you already did. And he finally remembered. So we're, I think, cool, unless they change shifts. But I'm out here for a really cool experience, something new for me. I'm going with the Asian American Center from Fuller Theological Seminary up to a place called Manzanar, which is a National Historic Park. And it was a site of a Japanese internment camp. And this is part of an effort that I'm going to have in May, which is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, to highlight some of the stories of AAPI, of the AAPI community. And so I'll get some video footage, hopefully have a short, mini film or video essay for folks to share. But I'm really looking forward to that. And had a great Easter. Visited some relatives, had some great food. We made lamb chops, which is a once a year thing, but they turned out great. And then headed from here to record a podcast retreat with Pass the Mic. And also just want to remind folks, if you're interested, my Roadmap to Ruin video series is available. All 4 episodes are out now. You can go to youtube.com/@jtisby, youtube.com/@jtisby. Watch all the videos on your own time. So that's what I've been up to. Diana, what about you? You've always got interesting things going on.
It seems like I might have been places in recent days, but there was a bunch of stuff that I recorded that showed up online. And so my Holy Week sermon, my Palm Sunday sermon, was the featured sermon on Day One, which is a pretty big radio network that is a website sponsored by mainline Protestant denominations out of Atlanta. And so that was a great experience to preach that sermon for Palm Sunday and then have it show up in all kinds of different markets. I enjoyed it very much. And then I also recorded a long interview with the people at grateful.org about the politics of gratitude. And that was just part of a big course that they offered, and they had several hundred people attending it. And I have gotten a lot of great feedback about that. And I was busy all Holy Week after Palm Sunday, putting together some experiences for my Substack community that were very well received. And one of them went, I guess, kind of what you might want to call mini viral. It wasn't like millions of shares, but it was definitely scores of thousands of shares, where I took the narrative of Luke's passion and put it up and against pictures from the news over the last 2 weeks around the Garcia case, and depicting, basically Garcia in the position of the innocent man being arrested and tortured by the state. So I was online a lot. And I wish, Robbie, I would have known that you were doing that thing at Roberts. I mean, that's like
Um,
8 minutes away from my house. I could have come up last night. It would have been really easy. And sometime we should, it'd been great if we could talk about that together, because just 5 blocks away from where that man was lynched 10 years earlier, the citizens of Alexandria dedicated one of the very first ever statues to Robert E. Lee. And it was a statue called Appomattox. It was an incredibly famous statue that was put up by the United Confederate Veterans. So it's one of the very first ever Jim Crow memorials after Reconstruction. And there's a picture of the city of Alexandria, and thousands of people are in that photograph at that dedication. And I've always wondered how many of those people 10 years later would have been at that lynching. And to think about the connection between those 2 events. And it's great to live in a town where the statue was taken down and the lynching is now being remembered. And so the work goes on, even in this day and age. And when it's controversial to do so this close even to Washington, D.C., we don't care. We're going to tell the truth in our town. And it took us a long time to get there, and people are really happy and and empowered to tell the truth historically. So that's great stuff. The only other thing is I'm going to Boston tomorrow, and I'm going to be at an event with Bill McKibben this weekend
Mhm.
on environmentalism. And people, I think a lot of people don't know that I really like care about this, and that it's been one of my passion projects, kind of on the side, for many years, to be involved in different aspects of green spirituality, eco spirituality, getting churches to think about divestment and other things like that. And I've gotten to be friends with Bill McKibben, the great environmental writer of our time, through it. And we're going to be together at Old North Church in Boston as part of their 250th anniversary celebration. Again, not approved by the current administration, in which we are going to hang, guess what, you guys? We're going to hang green lanterns from the steeple of Old North Church, and talk about not Earth Day, but Sunday is coming, and that is the explosion of solar energy, and how fantastic technological change is actually sweeping all over the whole planet right now in the shift from fossil fuel to solar. So
Sunday. I see what you
Sundays.
did there. Very
Yeah,
good.
see what we did there?
sounds
Sunday's
great.
coming.
Oh, well, we were right. Always something interesting with Diana Butler Bass. And not to be outdone, Kristen Dumais always has some good trouble going on. What's happening your way?
Oh, I mean, first I just want to say how good it is to be back here, all four of us, and how beautiful just this opening is. And Robbie, you really set the stage well, that each of you has brought this remembrance into and commemoration, right? You are showing up places, remembering what has happened. And I love that kind of deeper framing that you gave it, Robbie. This isn't just about getting our facts straight. And I think we can all agree that the four of us really like to get our facts straight. We spend a lot of time getting things right and get incredibly frustrated when other people don't, seem to care about what is true. But it's more than that, right? It is remembering our stories, remembering the true stories as a way of remembering who we are, right? And I think that is really gets at why this historical moment feels so destabilizing. Because I think that what is up for grabs right now very much is who we are. And that's why history is right at the forefront of the battle. They're trying to take away a history and to rewrite a fake history, because that changes who we know ourselves to be. So anyway, beautiful hearing all of your stories. I have nothing quite so epic. Looking back in this week, I mean, I'm at that. I have 3 kids, and this is the end of the school year. And oh my goodness, it gets me every single time. So shout out to fellow parents right now, all of the end of the year parent nights and special things and field trips and exams, and it's a lot. It's a lot. And so I'm in that, in the thick of that, just coming off a beautiful Easter weekend. We did it all, the gorgeous service and Easter egg hunts and Easter baskets. My kids are on the older end of things, but every year they let me do it. I'm out there with the eggs. So it was a very, very nice weekend. And otherwise, I am coming here for the last time from my office at Notre Dame. And that makes me very sad. I've had a absolutely lovely year here
I
at the
can't
Center for
believe it's been a
Philosophy.
year.
I can't either.
either.
Wow.
I was just telling Mike Ray, so Mike, a shout out to Mike Ray and to Laura Callahan for bringing me here, but I was just emailing him this earlier today saying, like, how is this the last official session because it has gone by so quickly. And I'm still used to my kind of the Kelvin schedule up until recently has always gone well into May. And so to wrap up a spring semester kind of mid-April feels abrupt to me. Nonetheless, here I am at Notre Dame, and yeah, it's just been an absolutely wonderful time. So shout out to all my colleagues here at the Center for Philosophy of Religion. It's been such an inspiring time and a refreshing time to spend the last year here. And on that note, in terms of what else happened this week, and particularly relevant to the Catholic world, but really to all of us, the death of Pope Francis. And so I really think that we should open this session and consider his life and his death and what that means for the Catholic Church and for really for the world at this point in time.
I mean, I actually shed a tear this week. Certainly, we've all known that Pope Francis was getting quite old and that he had been ill, but it seemed like being out of the hospital, he was under good care. He had appeared at Holy Week and Easter services, and that he'd made a turn, and to at least that he was going to be with us for a bit longer. And so when you wake up on Easter Monday morning and the first thing you hear is the Pope has died, it was really a little bit of a shock to the system, to anyone who pays attention or cares about what's going on with global Catholics. And Francis was, I mean, he was an amazing choice when they picked him, because he followed a very unexpected series of events. Pope Benedict resigning the papacy, retiring from the papacy, which was a strange thing in and of itself. And we never quite know why that even happened. And it hasn't happened very much in history, but he did. And then they had to have the conclave and the election, the whole thing. And Francis wasn't really kind of a known entity. As a matter of fact, there are some people who thought he was a little bit too moderate. They didn't even know, sort of what his positions were when he was elected. But when he came out and he said that he had chosen the name Francis, that became a signal to the world that something unusual was happening. No one had ever chosen the name of Francis before, and no one had honored that saint in such a manner. And I don't even remember the last time there was someone who was a monastic, who was also a priest, who then was elected pope. It's very rare. And so he was a Jesuit. He's the first ever Jesuit to sit in Peter's throne. So all of this was new. It was different. It was a surprise. And when he gave his earliest addresses, some of the first things he did was talk about how he was going to be a pope for the poor. And among his earliest liturgical actions were washing the feet of prisoners and disabled people, and really signaling that he was taking the name of his founder, Francis, who was the saint of the poor, seriously. Also, he took his vow of poverty seriously as a monk and wouldn't live in the papal apartments. Instead, just lived in a very modest place in the guest house at the Vatican. And he didn't go for all of this stuff. He didn't wear the red shoes. He didn't wear all the big fancy robes. He always dressed very simply in his role. And I suspect that people thought he wouldn't live terribly long because he was pretty old when he was elected, but he surprised us, and he lived a really long time, and he did a lot of things that were considered to be shockingly radical. And while to Protestants, there's always that doesn't look so radical to us kind of moment. The kindness that he expressed towards LGBTQ people was a very radical move, especially when he said things like parents of gay children shouldn't kick their children out of their homes. Now that sounds to us like common sense, and what decent parent anywhere in the United States would do such a thing, or in Northern Europe or whatever. But that's actually common practice in many countries where the church is growing, especially in the global South, is that there's a complete rejection of people who are gay. And Francis just coming out and saying, hey, love your children. They're human beings too. Don't push them away. Keep them in your embrace of family. That was incredible. And then also, his comment about gay marriage, and someone, he just off the hand said, well, who am I to judge? And conservative Catholics all over the world were yelling, you're the Pope, you're supposed to judge. This is sin. And he goes, no, who am I to judge? And his that whole demonstration of acceptance and love was startling towards trans people, especially in an anti-trans period. Could have wished he would have gone further with some of that, and certainly with repositioning women in the hierarchy, which he didn't do, except that women now participate on doctrinal levels at the Vatican, which is a big deal. And so there were some really pretty significant changes, but I think that the biggest change was in terms of what you might want to call vibes. um, the
Yes.
people came into when he came in, the church was in a terrible place vis-a-vis its long mess with the sex abuse scandal. And Benedict was not a loved human being in terms of his leadership. He considered to be kind of cold and dogmatic. And Francis changed that and became a beloved global figure of speaking truth to power, the power of capitalism, the power of environmental destruction, the power of authoritarian governments, the power of war. He spoke out strongly against all of these things, and did that with an inviting, very personable spirit that I think made many millions of people around the world feel like they knew him. I felt like I knew him. That's why I cried.
Just real quickly on his choice of the moniker Francis, there's a quote from him that I posted on Threads, and it said, some people want to know why I wished to be called Francis. For me, Francis of Assisi is the man of poverty, the man of peace, the man who loves and protects creation. So all those items you mentioned, Diana, around speaking up for the poor, speaking against war, speaking up for and defending creation is right there. Robbie, did you have any initial reactions?
Just a couple of things. I mean, I always try to pay attention to what people do first when they get a new appointment, a new position. So Diana's named some of them, like what he didn't do. He didn't move into the fancy apartment. He didn't get the fanciest vestments. So those are things he didn't do. But I remember like one of the things that the first official trip that he took was to this little island. I may not say it right, called Lampedusa, right? Which is where immigrants like come on their way to the EU, right? And so this deep signal, and I think that's the thing that struck me about him was like, and I was frustrated at times with him about where he wouldn't go as well, but what I think I never lost sight of in him was his sense of humanity, right? And that he just had this sense of deep humanity that he extended in all directions. And so that first symbolic trip to go where impoverished people are trying to make their way to the EU to better their lives, and for migrants all over the world. I mean, he was a voice for deep humanity, and and just want to shout out to Jen Rubin for posting this today, that reminding us that in 2016, when Trump was on the presidential campaign, impugning immigrants and saying all kinds of lies and terrible things about migrants, Pope Francis had this to say. He said, "A person who thinks only about building walls, wherever they may be, and not building bridges, is not
It's
Christian.
not a Christian, right?
This is not the gospel."
Yeah.
So
Came right out and said it. I remember also, speaking of the things that he did, he called the only Catholic church in Palestine, he called them almost daily,
Yes, he
personally.
did.
And after his passing, they said they felt like orphans.
Mm.
But that's how impactful that little personal touch of saying, hey, I see you, I remember you. We haven't forgotten about you.
He radically expanded the College of Cardinals too, which is something that will come into play for the more political angle of the story when the conclave meets to elect the successor. And the way that he expanded it was fascinating. And that is that he created the position of cardinal all through countries that had never had cardinals before. So there are cardinals in many African locations and dioceses where there hadn't been cardinals, throughout Asia, in South America. So the College of Cardinals is, he was a master at, let's just say it, DEI for the Catholic Church. He really created a leadership structure that racially reflected the composition of the global church. That's when women, kind of stand up and say, well, it would have been nice if we would have been reflected too. But the racial vision, the color of the skin of the College of Cardinals is now global. And it's not just going to be a plethora of Northern Europeans and a few North Americans and voting for the next pope. It will be a truly global church. It means that it's going to be a really hard election. As we know, the rifts between Western Church and the emerging churches of the global South is that's a very hard territory theologically and culturally, but he tried, and he's tried to put together a community of leaders who would navigate that kind of global vision, for a common humanity for the future. And it'll be interesting to see where they take it.
Before we leave this topic, I just want one other thing that I think is worth mentioning here, that has been kind of close to my own research is he was also the first pope to really take indigenous people's concerns very,
Yes.
very seriously, and their indictment of the church for its behavior toward them, genocidal behavior toward indigenous people around the world. And he actually went on what he called a penitential pilgrimage himself across North America and Canada, where he met with indigenous people, washed indigenous people's feet, like in ceremonies, and this kind of humility of being willing to hear that story. And while the apology didn't quite go as far as I would have liked it to go, he did at least acknowledge the role of the church in these awful forced boarding schools, and that did so much damage to decimate indigenous communities and destroy indigenous culture. And he did at least put that on the radar of something that the church was responsible for, and edged up at least to a full apology for those things.
Yeah, as we're remembering all of these things that he has done, it just strikes me how deeply rooted in Christian tradition and in Catholic social teaching, loving the stranger, the immigrant, the marginalized, of embracing poverty, of that humanity, that human connection, that even while holding theological doctrinal beliefs, still not losing sight of the humanity of the people that those doctrines affect most, right? Who am I to judge in the end that there's a basic humanity and the love of God that is primary, and everything else is kind of built around that. And you mentioned in passing rifts in the church, Diana, and of course it's not just between the West and the global church. His papacy opened up a rift, well, made visible and much larger a rift that is in the American Catholic Church as well, right? The level of disrespect towards Pope Francis from the conservative factions in this country's Catholic Church was astonishing to me.
Yeah.
As you know, these are the folks who are supposed to be all for hierarchy and authority, and the way that they were, the disdain that they showed for the Pope. Right, these are supposed traditionalists, right? And then like the most basic kind of tradition of the Catholic Church is that hierarchy, and that, you know, God speaks through the Pope. They are willing to, you know, throw that by the side. And of course, you know, most recently we saw that in a little tiff between JD Vance and the Pope. And we're used to all kinds of weird stuff happening in recent years, months. But let's just, you know, acknowledge how bizarre that is, and the audacity of a new Catholic convert to stand up
Question.
against the Pope.
Yeah.
Just astonishing, right? And the Pope greets him with hospitality the day before he dies. Still, I mean, that just is such a snapshot of the world that we are living in, and the real religious division, right?
Well,
There
they
is
thought
one.
that they thought that he was the anti-pope, which was the really interesting narrative to follow through all this. The MAGA right-wing theocratic deep part of the Catholic Church here in North America. Their vision, there was a whole theory that the radicals in the Vatican got Pope Benedict they forced his resignation, and they were holding him hostage somewhere in Rome. This stuff was all over the internet, and some of it being talked about by people that Francis would later remove from leadership in the Catholic Church. And so that they believed that the office of the Pope was technically vacant or still belonged to Benedict, and that in the same way Protestants sometimes will talk about an antichrist, they were talking about an anti-pope. And so there was actually an obligation on the part of the kinds of Catholics you're talking about to resist Pope Francis. And so the rudeness that comes up was a reflection of the fact that they thought that he was a pretender, and that his presence in Rome was actually destroying the church, and that they were morally and theologically and spiritually called to resist him at every turn. And
And of
I
course,
don't know how much of that would have leached into the kind of Catholicism that, say, J.D. Vance learned, but I do know it was it's very prevalent on
well,
the
and of course,
far
not
right.
coincidentally, the evidence for this, you know, that he's the fake pope and not the real deal is precisely the things of the love of stranger, the humanity in everybody,
Right.
the pro-immigrant, right? You know, no coincidence that this happens to line up pretty neatly with, you know, what is drawing on deep Christian teaching, going up against the current kind of authoritarian version of Christianity. So I feel like I kind of held off to give any comment on Pope Francis until the end, because you all were saying such beautiful things, and I had to sully it by bringing in JD Vance and you know, the opposition. But you know, here we are in this country, and ever present. So speaking of our current administration / regime, something big happened in the news yesterday, big in our little world at least. A missive from the a long-awaited missive on my part from the Anti-Christian Bias Task Force, right? The DOJ issued its first what is it? Not an executive order, first press release.
Press release, yeah.
Press release on the work of the I have to like really try to keep a straight face, Anti-Christian Bias Task Force. So let's talk about that. Jamar, what are your first thoughts on what we're looking at here?
Well, two things. One, speaking of the Pope, I felt it as a loss. I felt it as a loss of an example of a Christian who is trying to be like Jesus.
Yes.
And it's important to be like Jesus. He's not Jesus. Hence all the imperfections, right? And in the Catholic tradition, he occupies the seat of Peter. So we know Peter was messed up in a lot of ways. But, this real genuine effort, this witness of Christianity, it was gentle and embracing and inclusive of all the kinds of people that this administration in the US wants to shove out, literally take them out of the country in some cases. So there's actually a parallel here. The opposition that Pope Francis was facing, saying he's the anti-pope or a fake pope, when clearly, I mean, he's a priest, he's taking vows of poverty and chastity, like few people have that devotion. Clearly, he is trying to be faithful to his profession of faith as a Christian, but it's not the right kind of Christian. And for that reason, he must be opposed. In a similar way, when we talk about this anti-Christian bias task force, they're not talking about Christians like us on this call. They're not talking about Christians like the ones who are listening to the Convocation Unscripted. They're talking about essentially a right-wing political movement that uses Christianity as a cover for the power, the earthly power that it seeks. And when you go through, as we will, this press release and the examples, quote unquote, of Christian bias, that comes through very clearly. So I want the church to understand, especially those who aren't, mainlining news like we are, to when they hear Christian from this White House, they don't mean your kind of Christianity.
Right.
They mean their kind of Christianity, and you will be caught up in this net of oppression and marginalization at some point. So we got to be very savvy, because the language that they're using can trick you into thinking they mean one thing and they mean something completely different.
Well, and they tell us a little bit what they mean by this, right? Robbie, do you want to take us down
Robbie's
this road? You look
dying.
like you're itching to jump in here.
Man, I spent way too much time reading this press release today. I just got sucked in and I could not help myself because I just would and here's what's just, I mean, we can and should mock this mercilessly, like, and just laugh at it. But it is also extremely dangerous. Here is the Department of Justice, right, with this nonsense. Right. And so with all of its power, with all of its resources, right, for persecuting people and going after people, that's what they're setting the stage for here. And so, it's deadly serious, even though if just to read it, I mean, it's just, again, I mean, there's almost nothing on here. What they basically do in the press release is they go through everybody who's at the meeting and they say, this person talked about this outrage against Christians, and that person talked about that outrage about Christians. But like, I actually just spent a little bit, again, way too much time Googling some of these things because I never heard of most of the things they're talking about. And I was like, why is it I've never heard about any of these things? It's because they're just taking these tiny little things, twisting them and distorting them beyond all recognition. But here's the thing, the Department of Justice, in its first memo on the opening of the Faith Office on Anti-Christian Bias, is lying to the American public. Now just take that in for a moment, right? If there's any Christian value we might want to talk about arguing, it's not bearing false witness, it's telling the truth, right? And here we are. I'm just going to give you like a couple of my favorite examples. Two. I'm going to give two. I could just keep going. Two of my favorite examples. So Scott Hicks, Provost and Chief Academic Officer at Liberty University, is in the room and on the task force, right? So what does he talk about? The way Liberty University and Grand Canyon University were supposedly singled out by the Biden administration for fines due to the school's Christian worldview. Now, this one, there actually is some reporting on, and I went and looked it up. It turns out that what Grand Canyon University, which is, by the way, one of the largest, like, for-profit, it's not nonprofit, it is a Christian university, but it is a for-profit entity what it was singled out for is, wait for it, lying to its own students about how much their graduate degrees cost.
Yes.
That's
Huh.
what it was fined for.
Oh
So
my gosh.
if you twist this all around, that means that supposedly their Christian worldview that they're being persecuted for includes lying to their students, right? Like that's what they're standing on, the Christian principle about their right to lie to their students about how much their degrees are going to cost. Like that's what they were fined for. And then like the other one that I just, again, they're all like this.
Oh,
If you
wait,
kind
but
of
tell
just,
us what Liberty was, what was their problem?
oh, that one I didn't actually bother to look up.
Oh, I mean, I'm
Go ahead.
assuming,
Yeah.
Liberty has been held to account on Title IX and how they handle sex abuse on their campus, reporting. One of the biggest fines, if not the biggest fine, was levied against them, I believe. I didn't look this up, but this is just recollection. So I'm not sure if I don't know if that's what they're referring to, but if that's what the Grand Canyon case refers to, then I would not put it past them. So just, add that to the list. Like what anti-Christian bias, holding to account on protecting your students. Don't lie to your students and protect your students. That's it.
Yeah. But the
Oh
Christian
my,
values are our right to lie to our students and not protect our students.
Yes,
Those are the
exactly.
Christian values that they're
Exactly. Just
protecting.
that
that's
Liberty case, that's actually kind of scary because there was a huge murder case in the state of Virginia, a serial murder case. And the person who was eventually arrested, convicted, and is now in jail for 2 of the murders in this long string of murders, many of which still are unsolved, but they think that they're all related to him. It's just that he hasn't confessed for the other 8 or whatever it was. That fella started his career doing sexual assault at Liberty University. And Liberty University did not tell anyone. And so he was then just sort of kicked off of the campus after his second year for something having to do with his relations with women. And he then went on and eventually winds up as this serial rapist and convicted of murder of 2 young women. At one of them was at UVA. I can't remember where the other one was. But yeah, I mean, that's that case in and of itself, that the Justice Department came after Liberty to correct it. It had huge consequences in the state as a whole and the families in particular of these missing women, and terrible tragedy. I remember that so clearly because that connection to Liberty I would never forget, that's where this whole thing started, and nobody at Liberty did anything about it. They didn't tell anybody. They just sent him out the door to do it somewhere else.
And I will add that I'm close to a number of survivors, including survivors who were assaulted at Liberty, and who tried for years to work with the university to help them, to show them how to do better here, to show them how to protect the women who came behind them. And this is what draws survivors into the advocacy space, simply trying to protect future women from going through what they went through. And so many in the Liberty space, like they were all in with the Liberty mission, conservative Christians, and then just assumed when this terrible thing happened to them that they would have the support of the administration, that of course the university would absolutely want to do everything in their power to protect others. And year after year after year came to the realization that actually, no, that wasn't going to happen. And so, again, I don't know that this is the precisely what that was referring to, but that's the only thing that came to my mind. But
I'm just seeing the poster over your shoulder. You should plug it.
Yep,
remind
4
us.
daughters. The film on sex abuse in evangelical spaces and the repeated patterns of cover-up and complicity, and all of the survivors in that film and all of the ones I consulted with to make the film, right? Each and every one of them put so much on the line for one reason, and that was to try to prevent what happened to them from happening to another girl.
All right,
So
can I just do one more quick one?
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, Robbie, you
All
said
right,
you had
this is
two
my
of them.
second one. This
Yeah.
one will be very
Sorry.
short. No, and the one we've highlighted is obviously, I think, the most serious and huge one on there. But this will tell you, so it went from that, something that big and distorted and screwed up and turning morality on its head, to the obscure, right? And it's going to be no surprise who brings the obscure to the meeting, but Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Right?
I
Mr.
was gonna say
Conspiracy
Paula
Theory
White.
himself, right? Brings it. So when it's his turn to go around the table and cite the outrage, he comes up with this, that the Biden administration evidently ordered St. Francis Health System in Oklahoma to extinguish its sanctuary candle or lose its ability to treat patients covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or the CHIP program. All right. I checked this one out. Turns out it was a fire hazard, right? It had nothing to do with religion. It had nothing to do with religious symbolism. The inspectors determined it was an open candle burning in the chapel, that at a hospital, right? And they just said, yeah, this is actually a fire hazard and you need to kind of fix that. It had absolutely nothing to do with religion or the fact that it was a religious ritual or anything. So, but you can spin a conspiracy theory,
So what
especially if you're
Christian
RFK,
value is
anything.
having a fire hazard? Which one is that?
I went to a Christian college, and we were not allowed to have candles in our dorm rooms. So I did
Yeah.
not realize the level of persecution even at a
Yeah.
Christian
So let's just kind of
college.
tally
My
this up.
goodness.
The Christian values being defended by the anti-Christian task force are, let's see, being able to have open candles that might burn a hospital down with sick people in it, lying about how much your degrees are going to cost your students, protecting sexual predators that turn into serial killers. And am I missing one? Was there something else?
Oh,
We
that sounds
have the
pretty
COVID
comprehensive.
vaccine is in there, obviously, too. My goodness, it's when I read the list, when I saw the press release yesterday, I mean, immediately, like, my takeaway is, oh, now I understand what they're talking about. Anti-Christian bias. Anti-Christian bias is whenever a Christian is asked to just obey the law of the land and they don't feel like it. That's anti-Christian bias, which actually is a good thing, I'm going to argue here. So counter point. Jamar, you said this, Christians, this is not, people like us. When I read this, I immediately texted the friend who had sent it to me. She watches all of these things and found it the instant it was released and sent it my way. And I said, okay, here's the plan. And you know how we're feeling a little uneasy these days, all of us in this space, the whole pro-democracy space, and simply, pro-sanity space. And looking over our shoulders from time to time, thinking what's coming down the chute, watching lawyers getting detained at airports, wondering about border crossings and so on. So I said, if I ever get detained, you have the press release ready. And call on the anti-Christian bias task force, because I am telling you right now, everything I am speaking and everything I am doing is coming out of my Christian faith. As a matter of fact, my defense of DEI comes out of my Christian faith. As a matter of fact, the institution where I teach and their defense of DEI comes out of their Christian faith. So I, for one, am glad that we now have an anti-Christian bias task force ready to go to bat for us in case anybody infringes upon our rights to do whatever we think we would like to do, as long as we say our faith led us to. So I think we're on pretty solid ground.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I think it's a solid offense. Stress test the system. Absolutely.
Just wait for that press release, Robbie. Wait for that press release.
Okay, now everybody knows what it's like when we get together for dinner in person. This conversation, this is classic.
I want to read one quote from Pam Bondi, who was, I think, sharing it or at least spoke a lot. She said, "As shown by our victims' stories today."
Yeah.
Our victims.
our victims' stories today. And then they won't let this man not be president. Biden's Department of Justice abused and targeted peaceful Christians while ignoring violent anti-Christian offenses. Thanks to President Trump, we have ended those abuses, and we
Was
will
that-
continue to work closely with every member of this task force to protect every American's right, including Kristen Dumais' right, to speak and worship freely.
I just
There
want to
they
show
are.
the collection of victims.
There it is.
Oh,
Oh, I feel really
Pete
sorry for
Hegseth
these
is in the
people.
house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Paula White's in the house.
There's Christy Nome. Oh, she's not wearing her
a t-shirt.
yeah, her battle gear.
Anyway, not a lot of brown skin in that photo.
Not a lot at all.
I
Yeah.
think I see Cash there, so we've got
Yes,
Cash.
that's
Kash
true.
Patel. Yep,
Right.
he's right there. And Secretary of Education Linda McMahon is in the house as well. So anti-Christian bias task force, of course, what we haven't said is the way they are privileging a certain form of Christianity. So obviously it doesn't include our kind of Christianity, but even more pointedly, it doesn't include non-Christians.
Right.
So anyone of a different religion, anyone who does not practice religion, of course, they're put at even more disadvantage with something like this. And a task force, they're looking for problems and will create problems where there aren't any. So I suspect this won't be the last time, unfortunately, that we hear about this supposed anti-Christian bias task force in the news.
Do you all think that this is going to be one of the tools that they use next year when they do the celebration of 2026? Because what they can start saying is telling this Christian history of America. I mean, I feel like it's part of the setup.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Let me just get on the soapbox for this because I've been thinking about this a lot because next year's also the 100th anniversary of what became Black History Month. So it started in 1926 as Negro History Week in 2026. And so I'm commemorating that century of Black history. At the same time, we have this administration in charge of the 250, what is it, a sequicentennial? I can't remember, whatever it is.
Yeah.
250th anniversary since the Declaration of Independence. So the propaganda machine is going to go into hyperdrive, and it part and parcel of the propaganda will be this idea that the United States was founded as a Christian nation. And so, you know, almost a game of hot potato. The anniversary ends up with this administration, which is sort of the worst case scenario if you want actual accurate history around this nation. And so we're going to have to really be this is where the 1619 project kind of creativity comes in. What if we did a thought experiment and said, wasn't the Declaration of Independence but actual arrival of 20 and odd Negroes on the shores of Point Comfort, Virginia, marking, you know, one historical marker of the introduction of race-based chattel slavery? What if that's the origin story of the United States? So this is what I want to say to people. History is not simply about what people did in the past. History is about our identity. Our actions determine our character. And as we look at the actions of historical actors in the past, we get a sense of who we are as a nation, who we are as communities, who we are as individuals. What this administration is going to try to do is rewrite that story historically, and in so doing, rewrite the present character of the nation and the people in it. So we have to be working right now because that propaganda machine is already in motion.
I've already got 4 tickets for us for the Lee Greenwood Monster Truck Fest at the Kennedy Center. I just want you to know, you all to know.
Is there really one?
No.
Okay, because honestly, there could
Well,
be.
not yet.
Not yet.
You probably just gave them the idea. Make sure they pay you. I'll bring the American flag t-shirts.
So I am concerned about that because obviously there's a whole bunch of us who are going to be out saying, you people are lying, and we're going to be trying to do other things. And so does that mean that they have or think they'll have the power to come at us and say that we're doing anti-Christian bias in the public square?
Improper ideology.
Yeah,
is the
improper
word we're gonna use.
Absolutely, Diana. The first time I heard about this was, more than a year ago, and Trump was proposing this, and he gave a speech at the National Religious Broadcasters and touted this, and immediately, right? So I was kind of joking that I'm going to use it, although I'm not joking. I would use it if need be, and go down swinging. But immediately I knew, we are actually likely targets of that. I mean, you don't write a book with a subtitle, how white evangelicals corrupted a faith, without, taking some heat from exactly those guys, right, who perceive my work to be anti-Christian, your work to be anti-Christian. Again, this kind of circles back to where we started with Pope Francis. And so, I think that we joke about this because there is a fundamental absurdity here, but it is also serious, and it also obscures other important issues, which is, religious liberty is an important value. But so much of, what was contained in the press release, under the name of not just religious liberty now, but, anti-Christian bias, right? No, this is asking for exceptions, for actions that are not even religious in nature, and just playing up the narrative that the religious liberties of conservative white Christians are most at threat. And we know that is not the case, but we have the survey data to show that conservative white Christians do perceive that to be the reality. That is what they have been told over and over again. And in all of their media spaces, this is what they are told. Just before the election, David French, who spent, a chunk of his career working in religious liberty spaces and litigation, came out with this really nice explainer video, very kind of nuanced explainer video. Holy Post featured it on the state of religious liberty. Yes, there can be some cases where there's overreach, and guess what? The court steps in and those are corrected. But not every claim is sustained. And in fact, he made the argument, as somebody who has worked in constitutional law and in religious liberty in particular for a very long time, that religious liberty protections have never been more robust than they are in this moment. And that is not the narrative that you will hear in conservative spaces. And as you suggest, Robbie, like, religious liberty is not just to protect the majority group, it is to protect all of the groups. And that is never how you see it wielded inside these spaces. And that's very important to keep in mind. Again, they use terms, they use language, and it resonates with a particular audience and it seems true, but it is inaccurate and it twists the actual truth.
Yeah, and where's the anti-Muslim bias task force? Which is the group besides American Jews, it's the other group that actually we have hard data showing, right? Experiences all kinds of threats, violence. That's nowhere, right? So that tells you everything you need to know right there, right? That the group, the kind of minority group in the country, again, if you look at the data, it's Jewish Americans, Muslim Americans that are by far the biggest recipients of hate crimes in the country. But Muslim Americans, nowhere on the list here of a group that needs special protections.
And obviously want to remind folks, there's so much happening in the news every single week. We can never get to it all, and it's unscripted, so we're not even sure what we're going to get to in a single episode. But we are so glad you join us for these, and make sure to tune back in next week. It's a pivotal time as we look at the first 100 days of this political regime, and we'll have a bunch of reflections, and Robbie will have his new data. He gets to flex his sociological muscles, and we all get to reflect on it. So we would love to do that with you. Remember, of course, to subscribe to our biweekly newsletter, the convocation.substack.com. Just subscribe to that publication. And of course, our individual Substacks with all kinds of great content that these folks are doing are in the show notes. So thank you for joining this Convocation Unscripted, and we'll see you soon at our next episode.